Good morning. I'm Mark David Smith. Today we're going to discuss the Passover in the Gospels. And I want to start off by reading from Exodus 12, 1 through 8. And then I'm going to go to Leviticus 23, the first part of that. Exodus 12:1. Adonai spoke to Moshe and Aharon in the land of Egypt. He said, "You are to begin your calendar with this month. It will be the first month of the year for you. Speak to all the assembly of Israel and say, on the 10th day of this month, each man is to take a lamb or kid for his family, one per household, except that if the household is too small for a whole lamb or kid, then he and his next door neighbor should share one, dividing it into proportion to the number of people eating it. Your animal must be without defect, a male in its first year, and you may choose it from either the sheep or the goats. You are to keep it until the 14th day of the month, and then the entire assembly of the community of Israel will slaughter it at dusk. You are to take some of the blood and smear it on the two sides and top of the door frame at the entrance of the house in which they eat it. That night they are to eat the meat roasted in the fire. They are to eat it with matzah and maror. Leviticus 23, and by the way, I'm reading out of the Complete Jewish Bible by David Stern. So Leviticus 23:1, Adonai said to Moshe, tell the people of Israel the designated times of Adonai, which you are to proclaim as holy convocations, are my designated times. And we're going to jump down to verse 4. These are the designated times of Adonai, the holy convocations you are to proclaim at their designated times. Verse 5. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, between sundown and complete darkness, comes Pesach for Adonai. On the 15th day of the same month is the festival of matzah. For 7 days you are to eat matzah. On the first day you're to have a holy convocation. Don't do any kind of work. Bring an offering made by fire to Adonai for 7 days. On the seventh day is a holy convocation. Do not do any kind of work. All right. Well, that'll get us started. That's the basis of what this day is. It's April 8th, 2020, and we're actually in the 13th of Nisan. And what I just read there was speaking of going in to the 14th of Nisan, and that is this evening after sunset. And so this is what we're talking about. And I've got a few things to share with you on this, mostly scriptures that are from all four Gospels, but mostly from the book of John. So we'll be back right after this. And hey, look who I got with me. It's the Rabbi, Rabbi Daryl Weinberg. Chag Sameach, my friend.
And Chag Sameach to you. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, you got yourself a party going on there. You guys start early with the partying for Pesach.
Yeah, we're doing our broadcast at from 5 to 7 tonight.
Yeah.
And then we're going to eat.
Then you're going to eat, but. Yeah. It sounds to me like the party has already begun.
Oh, there's always a party going on here. Don't you know
that? That's right. Well, we have a party in our hearts, too, for the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
So that's right. Okay, well, I sent Daryl my notes on what I put together here, and Daryl is usually not available during these times, but I am thrilled to have him come in and join me with this and give his insight. I have a lot of respect for Daryl and his insight on the Torah and the Moedim. And so I'm thrilled to have him with me here today. Normally, he teaches the Torah portion on Sabbath at noon Eastern time here on the Messianic Lamb Network. The Messianic Lamb Network that you see back there. And I never miss a Sabbath, one way or the other, live or archived. And so I love hearing whatever he has to say. So what we're going to do is give a brief little introduction here. You can find the gospel, you can find the Passover in all four gospels. Matthew, Mark, and Luke barely have a part of the chapter that covers the Passover, Yeshua at the Passover. And what I found is that the book of John actually goes from chapter 13 verse 2 through chapter 17 verse 26, and you look at the full realm of the book of John, and that's almost a quarter of the book of John. So you kind of get a little idea there that John is probably the most quoted book of the Bible, of different scriptures or different verses that come out of there. And what we're going to find is there's about 20 different verses that are very, very, very common to normal quoting when you're talking to somebody or teaching and different verses like that. So what we're going to do, first of all, I want to go over the normal, a common Haggadah, and a Haggadah is the order of a service. If you're doing a Passover Seder, then what you'll have is an order of that service, and usually there's a little booklet that everybody has to follow along. And usually you have like a welcome and then the lighting of the candles. There are 4 cups involved: the cup of sanctification, the cup of judgment, the cup of redemption, and the cup of praise, which are brought into attention in different places during the Passover Seder. Another thing, and I'm just kind of going down the table of contents of the different things that are normally done. So you have Dikat Hametz, which is the teaching about leaven, the Yerkatz, which is the washing of hands. You go over the symbols of the Pesach. You you tell everybody what each thing means. You have the matzah, the blessing over the matzah, yakatz, which is the breaking of the matzah, and the explanation of the afikomen, which comes up later in a Seder. You have karpas, which is the vegetable dipped in salt water, which is usually parsley. Marar, which is bitter herbs. Some Seders have batzah, which is the egg. You also have zeroa, which is the shank bone. The 4 questions by the children. Koresh, which is the Hillel sandwich. Then you eat the meal. You have grace after the meals. Then the afikomen. And you talk about the cup of Elijah. And I'm finding that a lot of people these days are replacing the cup of Elijah with the cup of Yeshua. They're setting Yeshua at the table. And then you have Hallel, the Psalm of Praise. and then the ending prayer, which is Yahweh, accept our prayer. Now, this is my list of table of contents from the Haggadah that I wrote 20 years ago, and everybody, since it is tradition, there is no formal law saying that you must do this every year. You must remember it, but to actually to say it, is different. Everybody's Siddur could be a little bit different one way or the other. Now, what I've done is I've gone through mostly the book of John, and we'll have some verses from the other books, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, mixed in here too. But what I found, and I want to go over this real briefly, is that there are commonly taught passages from the book of John, and these passages I find are within those 5 chapters, 13 through 17, that are all a part of the Passover. One of the things, of course, is the washing of the feet, and everybody's familiar with Kepha's saying, "Oh, don't wash my feet," and if Yeshua telling him that if I don't wash your feet, then you can't have your place in the kingdom, and he goes, "Well, wash all of me then." You also have the verse of a slave is not greater than his master. Yeshua refers to himself as I am. Let's see. Also, there's the verse of receiving. When you receive someone I send, you receive me, in the book of John at Passover. If you receive me, you receive the Father. Yeshua reveals Judah's betrayal, of which we're all familiar with that. Another verse is, "I am giving you a new commandment: love one another." I mean, that's a Sunday Bible school verse that everybody is taught. Another one is, "Everyone will know that you are my disciples when you love one another." Kepha says, "I'll die for you," and Yeshua said, "Well, you're going to deny me 3 times. This is all at the Passover. Also, another verse is, "In my Father's house there are many mansions, or many places, and I go to prepare a place for you," all during the Passover. Yeshua said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one goes to the Father except by me," at the Passover. "Whoever trusts in me will also do the works I do greater works, because I go to the Father." This is at the Passover. "Whatever you ask in my name, I will do." Another verse, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. "If you ask for something in my name, I will do it. If you love me, keep my commandments." There at the Passover. Sending the counselor, the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, right there at the Passover. Yeshua also said, "I am the real vine. The Father is the gardener," and which we also know, "I am the vine and you are the branches." Jesus said right there at the Passover. Also, one of the main verses that a lot of us know is, "There's no greater love than a man lay down his life for his friends." And also, "If the world hates you, they hated me first." All these different verses that we've quoted through the years, how interesting. Most of us, I don't think, realize that these are verses that Yeshua quoted at the Passover. And so I've gone through, I wrote a Haggadah about 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, and I had done a study on this and tried to tie them into my Haggadah, which is the order of the service. And I had never gone back and done a more extensive research. So what I'm going to teach today is that more extensive research. And so first of all, let's bring Daryl in. Daryl, going through this list, is this anything that you had seen before? I mean, I know you know that the Gospels cover the Passover and all this, but pretty extensive list there of common verses that are quoted, isn't it?
Yeah, this is pretty comprehensive here. I've tip my hat to you, sir.
Well, it's good to know, though. I mean, it's like to me. We have a lot of people that do Passover, but a lot of people don't. I mean, it's something that's recognized. I mean, whether or not you're one of our new covenant brethren or even secular, that everybody knows about Passover. They just don't know what's behind it. And most of all, not reading through the New Testament to find that it's there at all. They all think that it's, this is something the Jews did, back in Exodus, or whenever. And they don't really know that much about it. But what I found very interesting to me is that we have the acronym WWJD, or what would Jesus do? And of course, in the Messianic realm, it's WWYD, which is what would Yeshua do? And so my post is that what would Jesus do today? He would do the Passover, and he would do it today. Why? Because this was just a tradition. It was what all Jewish people did, and it is what Yeshua, being a Jew, did. As a matter of fact, I think it would be odd to the Talmudim, Jesus's disciples, not to do it. I mean, when he got it ready, told them to go get ready, let's do this. It wasn't odd to them. It's like, yeah, sure, we need to get this together and do it. I mean, we're going to do it. But of course, at this Passover, Yeshua reveals that this is going to be his last Passover. So how do we know? We find that it is of great value to Yeshua, as he made sure to share the experience with his Talmudim. As we find in Luke 22:14 through 16, he says, when the time came, Yeshua and the emissaries, the disciples, reclined at the table, and he said to them, I have really wanted so much to celebrate this Seder with you before I die. For I tell you, it is certain that I will not celebrate it again until it's given its full meaning in the kingdom of God. And of course, as I said before, it would have been very odd to them, as this is their halakha. It's the way they walk. The Jewish word halakha means the way a person walks. That's their lifestyle. It's kind of another word for our word lifestyle, and this was their lifestyle. I mean, they lived out Torah, but they also lived doing the Moedim, the appointed times of the Lord. So Yeshua's life was given to him to proclaim freedom to the imprisoned, renew sight for the blind, and to release those who have been crushed. His life was given to him and taken away from him so that he could be redeemed. Now, in 1 Corinthians 5:7 through 8, it says, for our Pesach lamb, the Messiah, Yeshua, Jesus, has been sacrificed. Our Messiah knew this Passover story and read it every year. He knew what his life was supposed to be. So Now I want to kind of go through the different points of the actual Siddur, and Daryl, you're more than welcome to pipe in anytime you come up with something that you want to add to this. You're not allowed to subtract from it, but you can add to it anytime you want.
Is that so the plagues of Egypt won't come on me?
That's right. That's exactly right. That's what it is, even though it's my study. But I want your input. But once again, what I read in Luke 22:14-16 earlier of him saying, I really want to celebrate this with you, and then letting them know that he'd not celebrate it again. That can be a welcome. In other words, he's welcoming them to his Passover. I really want to do this with you. And, I mean, even though it is like usually a family thing, it often makes me wonder if the disciples didn't have their family actually there too. I mean, because a Passover Seder is usually with their family, and many of these men had families. Have you ever considered that?
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
We don't see any indication that anybody else was there, and it seems to be a pretty intimate gathering. And of course, there's a lot of speculation that this wasn't actually Passover that they did this. It was the night before that they would celebrate it together, knowing that he was going to be crucified on Passover, so that on the next night they would actually be with their families. Except we know that that's not true. They were all over the place after having been scattered.
Right. Several different ways to look at it. I'm with you. I've heard that too. I'm pretty sure that's what you teach, though, isn't it? It was the night before?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so if we're putting this together, then the first thing that was done was the washing of the hands, and we find in John 13:4 that so he rose from the table, removed his outer garments, and wrapped a towel around his waist. Then he poured some water into a basin and began to wash the feet of the Talmudim and wipe them off with the towel wrapped around him. He came to Peter, who said to him, Lord, you are washing my feet. Yeshua answered him, you don't understand yet what I am doing, but in time you will understand. No, said Kepha, you will never wash my feet. Yeshua answered him, if you don't wash, you will not share with me. Lord, Peter replied, not only my feet, but my hands and head too. Yeshua said to him, a man who has had a bath doesn't need to wash except his feet. His body is already clean, and you people are clean, but not all of you. Yeshua also humbled himself before his disciples in another way. In John 15:18, he says, if the world hates you, understand that it hated me first. If you belong to this world, the world would have loved its own, but because you do not belong to the world, on the contrary, I have picked you out of the world. Therefore, the world hates you. So the next thing in a Seder is actually the 4 cups. We have Exodus 6:6 says, therefore say to the people of Israel, I am Adonai. I will free you from the forced labor of the Egyptians, rescue you from their oppression, and redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. I will take you as my people, and I will be your God. Then you will know that I am Adonai your God, who freed you from the forced labor of the Egyptians. And this is normally said at a Passover Seder, and it's in most of the Haggadahs, I would have to say. We have 4 different things that go along with the cup. I will free you, which is the cup of sanctification. I will rescue you, which is the cup of judgment. I will redeem you, which is the cup of redemption, and I will take you, which is called the cup of praise. The cup of sanctification which is I will free you, and is also the first cup in a Seder, is from Galatians 5. You could tie Galatians 5 to this when it says, what the Messiah has freed us for is freedom. Therefore, stand firm and don't let yourselves be tied up again to a yoke of slavery. Sanctification means to be set apart. We are setting apart this time to bring honor to Yeshua, our Messiah, our acknowledgement and acceptance of his Father's sacrifice distinguishes us apart as separated unto him. We find in John 14:15, if you love me, you will keep my commands, and I will ask the Father, and he will give you another comforter, counselor like me, the Spirit of truth, to be with you forever. The world cannot receive him because it neither sees nor knows him. You know him because he is staying with you and will be united with you. Yeshua said, set them apart for holiness by means of the truth. Your word is truth. Just as you sent me into the world, I have sent them into the world. On their behalf, I am setting myself apart for holiness, so that they too may be set apart for holiness by means of the truth. Also in John 13:34, he says, I am giving you a new command, that you keep on loving each other the same way I have loved you. You are also to keep on loving each other. Everyone will know that you are my Talmudim, my disciples, by the fact that you have love for one another. And as we're talking about the cup of sanctification, meaning set apart, these are all verses where Jesus, Yeshua, is showing his disciples how they are set apart from the world, which I think is great. It's just it all ties in so well. Anything there, Daryl?
No, I think that that covers the essence of it. The grievous thing that we're finding is that there seems to be so little love amongst believers today. There's so much division, and it's what's causing us to be ineffective. I mean, Alan and I speak about this extensively on the Chameleon Show on Tuesdays, that you got all these people that are coming to Torah and finding the beauty of it, but then a spirit of judgmentalness comes upon them and condemnation. And there was actually one who posted something and can't believe that Trump is actually encouraging people to go to church on Easter Sunday. So, sorry, how long were you in churches for doing this? And now you're going to condemn everybody else for not getting the light? It's like, how long did God have to wait for you before you got it? So I always go back to 1 Corinthians 13, where Paul says that, you can do all this stuff, but if you don't have love, then you're just empty noise. You're just a clanging cymbal. You're nothing. God's not interested in your works if it's not done with love.
Very, very, very true. Exactly right. You're right. Which is interesting because you have the cup of sanctification leading right into Dikat Hametz, which is leaven, and the understanding of what leaven is. So you are to be separated from the world, separated to each other, love each other, and now recognize what is sin. So, as leaven being a symbol of sin, we find in 1 Corinthians 5:7 says, get rid of the old hametz so that you can be a new batch of dough, because in reality you are unleavened. For our Pesach lamb, the Messiah, has been sacrificed. So let us celebrate the Seder, not with leftover hametz, the hametz of wickedness and evil, but with the matzah of purity and truth. Yeshua also revealed sin in his at the Last Supper. He says, in John 15:20, remember what I told you, a slave is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you too. If they kept my word, they will keep yours too. And he, of course, as he went on, in John 16:7, he says, but I tell you the truth, it is to your advantage that I go away. For if I don't go away, the comforting counselor will not come to you. However, if I do go, I will send him to you. And verse 8, when he comes, he will show the world, show that the world is wrong about sin, about righteousness, and about judgment. About sin, in that people do not put their trust in me. However, when the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all the truth. For he will not speak on his own initiative, but will say only what he hears. He also will announce to you the events of the future. So we can see how this all comes together. Yeshua explaining leaven, what it's about, how the sin, and of course you're supposed to go through your house and get out all the old leaven. And that's what Paul's talking about. So let's not celebrate Seder with leftover hametz. Make sure you get it all out of your house, and that type of thing. So it's interesting as we go through, also in Matthew and Mark, that we see that there are other verses that have to do with several things in the Seder that go 1, 2, 3. For like the search for leaven, the matzah, the maror, the cup of judgment, all together in one discourse. You can see in Matthew 26:1, as they were eating, he said, yes, I tell you that one of you is going to betray me. They became terribly upset and began asking him one after the other, Lord, you don't mean me, do you? You had the search for leaven. He answered, the one who dips his matzah in the dish with me is the one who will betray me. There you go. You have the matzah in the Seder. The Son of Man will die, just as the Tanakh says he will, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for him had he never been born. Yehuda, the one who was betraying him, Judas, then asked, surely, Rabbi, you don't mean me. He answered, the words are yours. Once again, we have a search for leaven. While they were eating, Yeshua took a piece of matzah, made the barakah, which is a blessing, broke it, gave it to the Talmudim, and said, take, eat, this is my body, which is part of the maror, the bitter herbs. And then 26, verse 27, also he took a cup of wine, made the barakah, which is a blessing, and gave it to them, saying, all of you drink from it. For this is my blood, which ratifies the new covenant, my blood shed on my behalf of so many, so that they may have their sins forgiven. I tell you, I will not drink this fruit of the vine again until the day I drink new wine with you in my Father's kingdom, which actually covers the cup of judgment. One of the things that I've seen before, and Daryl, you might have experienced this too, is I've been to, for instance, somebody's house where they're taking communion. I've even literally been to a Sabbath Torah study. And of course, when you're there at somebody else's house, you're going along with whatever they're doing, and they take communion, but they use regular leavened bread. And then they read the scripture, this is my body. and I'm going, no, don't give me any bread. That's right. I'll drink the wine with you, but I'm not gonna drink, or I'm not gonna eat the bread. And
you should hear some of the conversations I've had with pastors about that.
Oh yeah, I know. But for the most part, at most New Covenant Brethren churches, Christian churches, they have the little wafer, which is unleavened, and it's fine, it works, but man, when you're breaking off bread and saying that, you don't get it.
Nope.
You just don't get it. And even though it's, I don't know, you just don't get it. That's why everybody should do a Passover. If you're, whether you're New Covenant brethren or Messianic, Jewish, whatever, if you claim Yeshua, Jesus, as your Messiah, you need to be doing Passover so you get it, so you understand what all these things are about. So, yeah, I've had my conversations too. So. One thing leads to another. Okay, the next part of the Seder is the matzah, breaking of matzah. In Exodus 12:30, it says, Pharaoh got up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a horrendous wailing in Egypt, for there wasn't a single house without someone dead in it. He summoned Moshe and Aharon by night and said, up and leave my people, both you and the people of Israel, and go, serve Adonai, as you said. Take both your flocks and your herds, as you said, and get out of here. But bless me too. The Egyptians pressed to send the people out of the land quickly because they said, otherwise we'll all be dead. The people took their dough before it had become leavened and wrapped their kneading bowls in their clothes on their shoulders. Compared with John 6:48, Yeshua says, I am the bread which is life. Your fathers ate the manna in the desert, they died. But the bread that comes down from heaven is such that a person may eat it and not die. I am the living bread that has come down from heaven. If anyone eats this bread, he will live forever. Furthermore, the bread that I will give is my own flesh, and I will give it for the life of the world. Matzah is called the bread of affliction because of the adversity and hardship Israel endured in the land of Egypt. So there we have the bread of life, Yeshua. Our Messiah is the bread of life. All right. Next part of the Seder is marar, bitter herbs. Tradition at this time, an individual experiences bitterness by tasting a very strong horseradish on matzah. So the taste will remind us not only of the hostility instilled by the Egyptians on our ancestors, but also the bitterness of sin in our own lives. A good example to show the bitterness of sin is the way Yeshua experienced the ultimate bitterness at this Seder. In John 13:21, after saying this, Yeshua, in deep anguish of spirit, declared, yes, indeed, I tell you that one of you will betray me. The Talmudim stared at one another, totally mystified. Whom will it be? And of course, we know it's Judas, Judah, Ben Shimon of Kiryat, and he took, going down to verse 13:29 of John, some thought that since Yehuda was in charge of the common purse, Yeshua was telling him, buy what you need for the festival, or telling him to give something to the poor. As soon as he had taken the piece of matzah, Yehuda went out, and it was night. John 16:28, Yeshua says, I came from the Father and have come into this world. Again, I am leaving the world, returning to the Father. Down to verse 33, I have said these things to you so that united with me, you may have shalom in the world and have turis, peace. But be brave, I have conquered the world. All right. The next part of the Seder is the cup of judgment, which is the I will rescue you. In 1 Corinthians 11:27, therefore, whoever eats the Lord's bread or drinks the Lord's cup in an unworthy manner will be guilty of desecrating the body and the blood of the Lord. So let a person examine himself first, and then he may eat of the bread and drink from the cup. For a person who eats and drinks without recognizing the body eats and drinks judgment upon himself. Once again, to me, this is also recognizing the leavened and unleavened bread. This is why many among you are weak and sick and have died. If we would examine ourselves, we would not come under judgment. But when we are judged by the Lord, we are being disciplined so that we will not be condemned along with the world. In 2 Corinthians 1:10, he rescued us from such deadly peril, and he will rescue us again. The one in whom we have placed our hope will indeed continue to rescue us. Now, Daryl, this is interesting to me. The part here under 1 Corinthians 11:27, he says, let a person examine himself first, that he may eat and drink from this cup. For a person who eats and drinks without recognizing the body eats and drinks judgment upon himself. This is why so many of you are weak and sick and have died. Right here in the midst of the coronavirus, there are so many people, and I know you've dealt with this, you've even dealt with it on shows and talked about it, is, people coming up with, why would the Lord allow this? Why is this the Lord's judgment? All of these things. When in fact, the way I look at it and the way my wife and I have talked about it is that, in Deuteronomy, we have where the Lord says, if you do these things, all will go well with you, or you'll be blessed. And it's got a list of things that you should do. If you don't do these things, all will not go well with you, or you'll be cursed. And it lists all the things off. The Lord has given us already. There's no judgment involved in this. He has given us the ways and means to either be blessed or not be blessed. And it says here, this is why many of you among you are weak and sick, because you haven't recognized his word. He's already given you the right thing to do. And because you won't do it or refuse to do it, all these things come on you and the world, because the world basically doesn't recognize God's commandments in the way that he has already set forth that we should do things. And this is the way I'm looking at the coronavirus. It doesn't have anything to do with God's judgment or him causing this or allowing this. It's like he's allowing it because he's already given you the way out of it before it even starts. But you won't listen to him. You won't examine yourselves. You won't follow by the ways of his laws. And that's my assessment on it.
Well, Yeshua says he did not come into the world to judge the world, because the world has already been judged. When God brought death into the world through his judgment in the garden, he passed judgment on man, he passed judgment on woman, he passed judgment on the serpent. And so Yeshua's job wasn't to come in and judge it again. He came in to save it. Now, when he comes back, he will be judging and he will fulfill that judgment. So since God operates out of space and time, judgment has already occurred, but now he has to come back in our time-space continuum in order to fulfill what he's already decreed. I look at things like the coronavirus as not so much that God is enacting it, but rather he is just simply taking off his hands of protection. The reason why we still have a heartbeat is because God wills it to be so. The reason why we still take breath is because God wills it to be so. The moment he stops willing that to happen, we're done. So the coronavirus isn't so much, I think, an act of, whatever, Ebola, coronavirus, the flu, the influenza virus kills many more people every year. Malnutrition kills many, many more people than the coronavirus. There are other things that play with regards to this, but the reality is that bad things happen because God just simply removes his hand of protection. And the enemy, who is the God of this world, has license to go after him, just like Job. All God did was simply give Job permission to do, or to give Satan permission
right.
to do what he wanted to do, which is to destroy Job. So God gave him limited access to him. And so through the coronavirus, God is giving Satan limited access, not complete free, because otherwise he would destroy everything. But that's why it's been so important that everybody comes to repentance. And I've heard so many prayers that are nothing but platitudes. And it grieves me, and I know it grieves God, because we're not dealing with the core issues. We're not dealing with the fact that the church has been asleep at the wheel and allowed unfettered abortion, euthanasia, gay marriage, and the list goes on, transgenderism, and the mutilation of our kids. We've allowed that.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've been given authority here on earth to stand up and say that the gates of hell will not prevail.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we don't do that, God has to allow persecution in the world. And you quoted John 16:33, I tell you these things for you will have tribulation or sorrows in the world, but fear not, I have overcome the world. It's not just the tribulation, it's the world that he's overcome, but we're not acting like it.
Right.
And so God really has no choice to say, okay, I told you what the rules of engagement were. If you're not going to abide by them,
exactly,
here's the consequences. I had to have a conversation with my son about that yesterday. There are consequences to our actions. And we have an entire generation of people that have been duped into believing otherwise.
Right. It's interesting. We watched a documentary called Pandemic, and it's a 6-hour documentary, 6-part, 6 hours, and they finished and published this documentary in December of 2019. And one of the things they said on the last episode was, it's not if the next pandemic, it's when is the next pandemic. And this was December of 2019, and said, well, if they hadn't published it then and waited another couple of months, they wouldn't have been able to publish it at all, because they would have had to gone into the next pandemic that was starting right after that. But an interesting thing in this documentary, it talked about if a virus is through a human body, in other words, it starts through a human body and it's spread, the human body can fight this because we have what we need already in our blood and body to fight this off. But when they start in an animal, then we don't have what we need to fight that off. So we need help in fighting it. We can eventually fight it off, but it's better to get some kind of vaccine or something that will help us along with this. It doesn't necessarily mean we need to get the vaccine ahead of time or whatever, but they can fight this off. But it's harder. So it's interesting to me how these vaccines are named, like the swine flu, the bird flu, and they are starting in animals that are unclean, and then they spread, and it's like the Lord has already told us what's clean and unclean. If we would just stop using animals that are not food for the things that they are, and stop developing things through these animals and allowing that to spread like that, it would be a whole nother story. That's why I said the Lord has already given us the way to get around this before it ever starts, but yet the world doesn't recognize what our God has already said, has already put forth. But like you said, you put that out there too, and so
Yeah.
he's already given us what we need. I mean, to live perfectly, and we just seem to want to ignore that. Thanks, brother. I appreciate that. Very good. Okay, the next thing on the Siddur is Yakatz, the breaking of the matzah. Traditionally, the afikomen is matzah wrapped in a linen cloth and buried, only to be found by the innocent, who is then paid a ransom for the afikomen and given a promise of the Father to receive more at a later date. So the afikomen, in the Seder, we get from Leviticus 23:5 in the first month. On the 14th day of the month, between sundown and complete darkness, comes Pesach or Passover for Adonai. On the 15th day of the month is the festival of matzah. For 7 days, you are to eat matzah. On the first day, you are to have a holy convocation. Don't do any kind of work. Tell the people of Israel after you've entered the land I'm giving you and harvest its right crops, you are to bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the Kohen. He's to wave the sheaf before Adonai. The Passover is observed on the 14th day of Nisan, as we kind of covered before we even started everything. So what happens at this point is earlier on, the afikomen was hidden in an afikomen bag, and I was going to bring that and forgot to bring. I have my afikomen bag, which has 3 parts to it, and what we do, and Daryl, if you do something different or you'd like to explain, I'd like for you to also enter this. But what we do is we take 3 pieces of matzah, take the middle one, break off a small part of it, and then put in the 3-part bag is we'll put the 2 full ones on the outside and put the small one in the middle of the bag, the middle compartment. And then later on, we bring that out and speak of how Yeshua is that broken part of the matzah. Do you do it any different? Can you explain that a little bit more in detail for us?
We do the exact same thing. It's that's customary, and as I'll be addressing tonight when I get to that part. So, spoiler alert for all of you who are going to be joining us.
First time.
What's interesting is that the word afikomen is not Hebrew, it's Greek.
Right, exactly.
That which is hidden or that which is to be found later.
Right.
And so we know that it was a tradition that came along later on, and it is believed actually that because nobody's really sure where the tradition came from. And the rabbis have many explanations, as they always do. It represents the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It represents the priests, the Levites, and the common people. But no explanation really satisfies what the practice is of breaking that middle piece and burying it and hiding it and then finding it, except if it was a Messianic interpretation that it represents the triune God, and the middle piece, which is the Son, is broken, buried, and then found. And then the practice in Jewish homes is that the father of the household, the leader of the household, whoever's conducting Seder, has to purchase the afikomen back. So I remember when we would go to my aunt's house, my uncle was a lawyer, and there would be bargaining that would be going on, and it's only supposed to be the person that brings it back, but they would end up giving money to all the kids,
right,
which was kind of neat. And they would be sitting there going back and forth. Jewish household, you have to have bartering. It's just the way it goes. And but this idea that the son is buried and then is purchased back, and so that it also represents us, because when the father pays to have the afikomen, he redeems the son, and so we are redeemed too.
Amen. It's so good. They do it. Jewish people do it every year and really can't grasp it. I pray and just know that there are many that do this, and they've heard the gospel. They know the New Testament. So many of them know the New Testament better than we do sometimes, and they'll be in the Seder and they'll be doing this, and as they're doing it, all of a sudden, the Ruach HaKodesh just kind of overwhelms them, and all of a sudden all these scriptures these verses come back to them, and they start putting two and two together, and they start hesitating and teaching it, and all of a sudden they get it, and it's like, what do I do now? I know what this is. And I know this has got to happen. I know it's just got to happen.
Well, it's funny because the first time I ever did a Passover presentation at a church, I had a friend of mine, and she was there with me. And as we were going home later, she says to me, "It's so obvious. How come they don't get it?" I said, "Well, Paul says that in 2 Corinthians 3, I think it's verse 11, that there's a veil that lies over their hearts when they read the Torah."
Right.
Tova wants me to say something again. What do you want me to say again? I've said a lot. We'll let her type that in.
Yeah. It's interesting. I always think of it, we have to pay a ransom, which is, to me, not exactly the right word, but, of course, we have to give up everything. We pay with our lives, what you said right at the last. I don't know what the whole part of it there. Anyway, about the Afikomen. Yeah, well, that's that was quite a little bit. Tova, I'll tell you later, okay? No, I think paying that ransom, paying with our lives, we buy that, and it's supposed to be a gift. It's not supposed to be something that you can buy salvation, but we pay for it by giving up everything that's behind us and going on with that which we understand with the Lord. So I love it. As far as all this is concerned with the book of John, in John 1:1, it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." John 6:51 says, "I am the living bread that has come down from heaven. If anyone eats this bread, he will live forever. Furthermore, the bread that I will give is my own flesh, and I will give it for the life of the world." And then we yell, "Afikomen, come forth." Of course, by rising from the dead, he was not only man, but identified himself with God, as in John 14:6, which is at the Passover. Yeshua said, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Because you have known me, you will also know my Father. From now on, you do know him. In fact, you have seen him." John 15:1, "I am the real vine, and my Father is the gardener." John 13:20, "Yes, indeed, I tell you that a person who receives someone I send receives me, and that anyone who receives me, receives the one who sent me." In John 14:6, where it says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," if you look at that, and I was speaking earlier about the Jewish word for the way a person lives, which is halakha. And I believe Yeshua would have said here, "I am the halakha." And to me, it's almost as though he's saying, "I am the halakha," which is the truth. It's the way a person walks. So walk the way I walk, which is by the laws of God, and all will go well with you. And I am the life. If you walk this way, if you walk this halakha, you'll have the truth, and you'll have l'chaim, you'll have life, you'll have everything that God has to offer. But you have to walk this way, because no one comes to the Father except through the halakha and the truth and the life, which is what he's saying, I am, so through me. Anyway, I love all that. I think it's so perfect and follows true to what the Passover is all about. The next thing on the Siddur is the cup of redemption. Did Toba get answered?
She said she'll
go back and listen to it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The next thing on the Siddur, the cup of redemption. I will redeem you. In Romans 3:24, it says, by God's grace, without earning it, all are granted the status of being considered righteous before him through the act redeeming us from our enslavement to sin that was accomplished by the Messiah, Yeshua. And I have always said, one of the biggest topics ever in the Messianic lifestyle is that of being saved. And what does it mean to be saved? And is there a different determination of being saved, when Yeshua the Messiah, than when you walk with your Christian walk and all that? And it's just like it says right here, I believe we are saved from the power of sin, because once you know the laws of God, once you understand the halakha, the way God wants us to walk, then you now have sin revealed before your life, which you didn't have before. If you don't know the laws of God, if you don't know what the way a person walk with God, you don't know what sin is, and it's not sin to you. But once you do, it's revealed, and that sin no longer has power over us. So I believe that's exactly what he's saying here.
Sounds good to me.
So through all four Gospels, record a brief essay on Yeshua's this part of Yeshua's meal. Luke refers to this cup, the cup of redemption. Luke 22:20. He did the same with the cup after the meal, saying, this cup is the new covenant, ratified for my blood, which is being poured out for you. But Rabbi Shaul, the Apostle Paul, also refers to this Passover Seder. He says, 1 Corinthians 11:25, likewise, also the cup after the meal, saying, this cup is the new covenant affected by my blood. Do this as often as you drink as a memorial to me. So when the Hebrew people made sacrifices at the tabernacle and the temple, there were certain parts of the animal, like memorial offerings, for instance. And by accepting the cup of redemption, his blood, you accept the new covenant and make a memorial offering specifically for your Lord. And then the last cup, the cup of praise, I will take you. This cup can be compared to making a toast. I've always taught at the end of all the Seders that I teach that, how we'll, during the Seder, if you've done a Seder before, is that every time we do a cup, we'll pour the grape juice or the wine in it, and you hold it up. And it's the same as making a toast. If you're toasting somebody or honoring somebody, you will hold this up. And so it's kind of a picture of Yeshua lifting up his glass to honor the disciples, the Talmudim, and saying, in John 14:1, it says, don't let yourselves be disturbed. Trust in God and trust in me. In my Father's house are many places to live. If there weren't, I would have told you, because I'm going there to prepare a place for you. Since I'm going and preparing a place for you, I will return to take you with me, so that where I am, you may be also. So after telling his disciples, the Talmudim, that, this is the last time I'm going to eat with you until after the kingdom, and they're all kind of bummed out about what's going to happen and really don't understand. He's saying, don't let yourselves be disturbed. In my Father's house are many places to live, and you'll go, and I'm going to prepare a place for you, and you'll be there with me. So the encouragement is there. All right. The last part of the Seder is the Nertzah, which is Yahweh, accept our prayer. One of the things I thought was real interesting when doing this research is the whole entire chapter before they left to go to the Garden of Gethsemane is the whole chapter 17 is Yeshua, Jesus, praying for his disciples, his Talmudim, the entire chapter of John 17. And so it's interesting because the Seder ends with a prayer, which is next year in Jerusalem. But also, and I don't know why I put this here in my notes, but actually before that is the Hallel, the Psalm of Praise, which comes from Psalms 133:1. Behold how good and pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. And the word Hallel in Hebrew means praise, and that's what they did, is they praised the Lord. And there's a whole part to that. We find in Matthew 26:30, it says, after singing Hallel, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Same thing in Mark 14, it almost exactly. In Luke 22:39, it says, on leaving, Yeshua went as usual to the Mount of Olives, and the Talmudim followed him. John 18:1, after Yeshua had said all of this, he went out with his Talmudim across the stream that flows in winter through the Wadi Kidron, to a spot where there was a grove of trees, and he and his Talmudim went into it. So in other words, they did the prayer, they sang to the Lord, they praised him for all his goodness, and then they left and went to pray at the Garden of Gethsemane. So there's everything I put together as far as what you have in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, which is brief, and then about a quarter of the book of John, putting all these different scriptures together. And as I see it, this is my study, this is my research. These are scriptures that went along with the different parts of the Passover Seder. Anything you want to add there, Daryl? I think it's interesting that to me, whichever night he did it, it was still. Don't you still believe it's a Passover Seder?
Yeah,
it's all the different parts to it. It's just you think it was actually the night before. It wasn't actually the night of the 14th when it's commanded to do. They're not commanded to do. They just said get together. It's not a command whatsoever to do a Passover Seder, as far as I see.
Well, there's so many ways of looking at it, and you start dissecting this and that, and how many angels can dance on the head of a pin.
Well, let's argue about it a little bit. Let's find some discord here some way. Can't we just find some discord? It's what we do, Daryl.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't think you could be Messianic unless you just found some discord with a brother, So
that's very true.
I'm not trying to do that at all.
It's a possibility, but at the same time, the 10th of the month had to be the Sunday, because they call it Palm Sunday, when he came into Jerusalem, and they chose the lamb and they watched him for the 5 days. And so it most likely would have been Wednesday night that they would have met together, and then going into Thursday is when he was brought before Pilate and crucified on Thursday morning. And so then you have 3 days and 3 nights, and him rising before for sunrise on the first day of the week, which was first fruits. So that's the way that I look at it.
Right. Well, I think actually it follows exactly the days that's going this year. I mean, here we are Wednesday, and that's what's happening tonight. It's going into it. Where a lot of people get thrown off by the 3 days and 3 nights, and the fact that he had to be taken down off the cross before Sabbath, is most people that don't study this out, most people that don't walk in the Messianic walk, is they don't understand high holy days. Because to call it a Sabbath doesn't mean it has to be Saturday, because the high holy days, which follow the Moedim, the appointed times of the Lord, can fall on any day. It can fall on a Sabbath, but it can fall on any of the other 6 days. So if he had to be taken down before the Sabbath, it had to do with the high holy day Sabbath, not the weekly Sabbath. See, and that's where people get caught up in that 3 days and 3 nights. It's like, well, there's no way they took him down off the cross on Friday night before the Saturday Sabbath, and then there's 3 days and 3 nights. See, so what you're saying and following through is exactly right, and it's interesting that it is actually following through those days this year,
right?
Which it doesn't always do. So.
And the parallels between that and what's going on, that this is the first real Passover anybody has had to experience, because y'all have to be in your homes.
That's right.
And you know, with Israel being under complete lockdown as of now, I think it starts at 6 o'clock, so that's 11 o'clock our time, and so it's on. And you literally, I mean, look what's going on in New York. Tell me the angel of death isn't passing over that state right now. I mean, how many died yesterday? 800 or something like that?
Very true. Very true. Very true.
So, I mean, there's so many things that are lining up to say that I'm still talking to you. You're not listening. So I'm excited. It has been incredibly hard, not only for everybody, you know, in general, but us in particular, since this thing, because we came down to Niagara Falls right as this thing was getting going. You know, we came down on the first day of winter on December 22nd, and I mean, it's been crazy, and God is just saying, hang on, hang on, hang on. And then all of a sudden this thing flares up. But now he's promising, and, you know, guys like Chuck Pierce and Dutch Sheets, they're all saying something is going to happen tonight. And that's because there has been extensive repentance. There's been extensive praying and seeking the Lord. I mean, you know, getting the Daniel 9s and the Nehemiah prayers. And
I love it.
Yeah, it's like,
well said.
So this is the heart of God, that if we're covered under the blood and we complete the blood over this thing, that it is going to stop. I don't think it's going to just disappear as of tomorrow, but something is going to change tonight, because I do believe that this time around, enough people have come to the Lord and responded in the correct way.
Mm-hmm. We are living out history as we speak, and I think there's so many people that just they have so much fear they don't realize the actual history, that the times they are a changing. Thank you, Mr. Dillon. It is a perpetual thing, and it's just, you know, it said that, you know, in the last days knowledge will increase, and plagues will increase, and everything going on. It's just amazing the time that we're living in. And, you know, I believe what's going to be the most interesting thing about everything going on, and of course following right along with Passover here, is the next few months hearing all the amazing stories of what has happened with people during the past 2 or 3 months, with the quarantine and everything like that. I think that we're gearing up to hear a lot of pretty amazingly good stories, bad stories, all kinds of different things. Of course, 9 months from now, we're going to have the biggest baby boom in history. You know that. But anyway, what was it yesterday? You guys were talking on Chameleon Show. There was a headline in Israeli news or something about this is the first time they've had a lockdown or nobody out on the streets since the plagues.
Since the Exodus 3,500 years ago.
Yeah, right. I think that was real interesting. I hadn't thought of that before, but that's good.
As I said, are you getting it yet?
That's right. That's right. You better get it quick.
And yet we still have churches doing Easter eggs and stuff like that. It's like, oh,
I know, brother. I know. We shall endure. We shall endure, and we are enduring. I love you so much, man. I really do. I really appreciate your being here with me on this, because it's always love the input, and I have so much respect for you. I really do. I of all the people the Lord has brought into my life, and this was a definite divine intervention of the Lord, putting us together the way I found you and everything, and getting us together. And what's happened since is that I truly thank the Lord daily for you being in my life, and I appreciate you, man. I really do. Got a lot of respect for you.
And we love you too, and are grateful for all you do on the Lamb Network. This ministry is so important. So remember to like and share. And let's get the word out. There's people who have to know what's going on. I was on a Canadian Christian Business Federation meeting. It's kind of like what's the one where the BNI? It's Christian BNI. And we were doing a Zoom call, and the leader was promoting our Seder tonight to all these believers. And so we're excited about this. God is doing something. And I believe that those of us who have been hunkered down, I'll end with this. I was listening to Dr. Michael Lake the other day, and he was talking about Purim. And the thing that he said to me just impacted me so much, where he said that Esther was hidden under the nose of the enemy right in the palace. And with all the plans that the enemy has, many of us have been hidden. We're not doing what we really believe. I mean, on Monday, I was digging holes in someone's backyard. You wouldn't really consider that to be much of a ministry thing, but the Lord was just putting upon my heart, I'm hiding you until I release you, because you have been appointed for such a time as this. And there's a whole bunch of us out there who've been appointed for such as this time. So once we celebrate the Passover tonight, once we sing, next year in Jerusalem, get ready, because God is about to unleash his army, and we've been in preparation for this for a long time. We have much work to do for the King. So be ready.
That is a fact. I appreciate you saying that. Once again, tell us how can we find your broadcast tonight on Facebook? And I'm going to show here in just a second. I'm going to show how you can find everything on the website. But if you'll tell people, how can they find you on Facebook?
I'll post it here on the comment section.
Okay. And I need that link, I guess, for to make sure I have it in the on the website too, where people can know.
Okay. It says it didn't like that, so if you go to okay, so what we'll do then is our Facebook page is Ruach HaEmet, and HaEmet are together. So there we go. And we'll be broadcasting from 5:00. Now, I believe the O'Haras are broadcasting their Seder on Lamb Network tonight.
Well, they're doing kind of a Seder teaching combined thing, kind of like what I did today. I mean, I didn't go through the whole Seder and teach the Seder. I took it from a different direction. And I think they're doing a similar thing. They're doing a Seder and taking it from a different direction. And so you can still follow along with them. And that's going to be live right here on the Messianic Lamb Network. You can get through YouTube. You should go to the website. Let me just do this real quick. We're going to go to the website here. This is the Messianic Lamb Network website. Let me get back to the first thing that you're going to see when you come to it is Passover broadcast. Down here at the bottom, underneath down here, if you click on Abigail and James's picture tonight, you'll be able to go right to their broadcast. But if you come on here, on the website, Messianic Lamb Radio or MessianicLambNetwork.com, click on Passover broadcast right there in the middle. It'll take you to a page. There you go. It'll take you to this page, which you'll see the 2020 Today Live. That's me. That'll be up here in a minute with the link so you can watch the archive of this. But also, this you can click on this and watch James and Abigail, and then here is Daryl's Pesach Passover Seder 2020 from Canada, and I'll put the link to that on there. Also tomorrow, Don Hagedorn has a teaching that will start at noon Eastern time called Hezekiah's Second Passover and Warnings of Seven. You can't watch that now, but you can watch it after noon tomorrow. Now, here's another thing. Here's 4 different messages that have been taught already before now by people from the Lamb Network on Passover. So you can spend the day watching them if you like. Also, here at the bottom of 2019, we still have Rabbi Daryl's Passover Seder from last year. You could, if nothing goes right, you could actually click on that and follow along with this Seder from last year if you want to. Or if you want to gear up for tonight and be ahead, you could do that. But once again, you can find this by going to the home page and just clicking on Passover, say this right here, and it'll take you right to it. And also James and Gail are down here. Anyway, that's our Passover information, and trying to keep everybody in line.
All right. Hey, listen, I got a jet here. We got to get prepared for tonight, but thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Love you, brother. Appreciate it so much. Also, everybody watch Rabbi Daryl on his weekly Sabbath teaching on Sabbath at noon Eastern time. You can get all the other details. But there you go. Thanks, brother. And so we got to go. Susan's here. See y'all later.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.